These damn rapscallions of today, always glued to their Android pads and computers. They'll never know what life is supposed to be. Back in my day, we played in the street and bullied everyone who was even remotely different to us. We had moral panics over absolutely everything. And when we didn't like what they said on the tube or the airwaves, we would write handwritten letters and lick the stamps and pay to complain. We ate microwave dinners in front of the TV as a family. And we also destroyed the ozone layer. We spread misinformation like wildfire. Oh yes, and of course we beat the mental illnesses out of our children, and in turn our husbands beat us. We could use racial slurs without consequence. We did our duty and stopped the young ones from enjoying comic books, video games, Dungeons and Dragons, and rock music, because we knew that imagination is the work of the devil. Ah yes, those were the days, not this hokum. Using the internet to express yourself and make friends. Sharing skincare secrets left, right and center on the top ticks and the face pages and the Insta telegrams. Even the notion what these kids should be doing is perishing from asbestos-related illnesses like real human beings do. That is not too much to ask. Anywho, great chatting, Marissa. Please send my regards to your mum, and please tell her Auntie Jemima's surgery went quite well. Hugs and kisses. Post. Hello everybody, I'm Kelly, also known as Sir Rainbow Sky Child, and did you know that I'm not mentally ill? I just spend too much time on Instagram! Or so I've been told, and not just by the boomers. People my age and younger than me have said the same, but I have noticed that it's usually neurotypical people who have come to that conclusion. My theory is that being neurotypical, they really can't fathom how earth-shattering and crippling mental disorders can be. So in an effort to at least try and better understand it, and I suppose in some ways help, they mistakenly analyze the behavior of mentally ill people and then falsely accuse them of bringing their illnesses upon themselves. Here's what I mean. Just say, as an example, there is a neurotypical, fully able-bodied person who feels good most of the time, and they don't spend all that much time online or on social media. When they come across somebody who is depressed or anxious or what have you, and they notice that that depressed or anxious person spends a lot of time doom scrolling, they will immediately assume that it has to be the scrolling, because they don't scroll and they're not depressed. But the person who does scroll is depressed. So 1 + 1 = 2, right? And then they'll say, all you need to do is just put your phone down and then you'll feel better. Wow, amazing, spectacular, depression and anxiety have been cured. Tell the doctors, tell the psychiatrists, tell the therapists, tell everybody. The road to hell, they say, is paved with good intentions. But what does this have to do with digital detoxes and dopamine fasts? Well, for the last 2 or so months, I have been struggling with severe task paralysis. This was majorly problematic because I need money to live, and the only way to get that is to do my job, and the only way to do that is to, do it. But task paralysis prevents you from doing things. And in that time, multiple people told me that the problem was that I was on my phone too much and that I should just put my phone down, stop scrolling through social media, and just focus. Now here's the thing, mental well-being is a super complex topic, and obviously lifestyle plays a major role in it. It makes perfect sense that a device with all the accessibility in the world could be a distraction, and that distraction could kinda interfere with how you live your life. It also makes sense that the deeper one goes down that rabbit hole, the more problematic that distraction becomes. I'm not arguing that at all, but when I was trying to explain, my brain is off, and this is a huge, huge problem and also a symptom of a much bigger problem, and I was told that Instagram is the problem, it kinda irritated me, so I brushed it off. Because I can't speak for everyone, but I know in my case, it's not my phone that's the problem. It's my brain. If it were so simple, as, cutting out social media or spending less time on my phone, I would have cured my own anxiety and depression and insomnia years ago. You'll think I haven't tried this shit? But then, a few weeks ago, in the thick of the aforementioned task paralysis, something super concerning happened. I hadn't gotten anything done the entire week, and I was firmly under the impression that it was Wednesday night and that I still had 2 whole days to get some work in before the weekend, only to pick up my phone and realize that it was late on Friday night. I have no idea what happened to those 2 days before, but I was in a complete fucking time warp. I lost 2 whole days, and the only thing I could think as to what happened was that I had spent the last 2 days doom scrolling on Instagram. So, realizing with true clarity for the first time in my life just how much time I actually waste online, I decided to listen to what some people around me were trying to tell me, that maybe scrolling social media, my phone, is the problem. So I pledged to do a dopamine fast. Mostly to see if vegetating really was the problem. This video is that experiment. But before I show you what came of that, there is quite a bit that I have to explain. So grab a cuppa, or something stronger, and let's deep dive into the world of dopamine fasts, what they are, how they work, and whether or not they're as valuable and life-changing as, ironically, the internet would have you believe. The term dopamine fast or dopamine fasting was coined by a psychiatrist named Dr. Cameron Sepper in a LinkedIn post back in 2019. As I understand it, this particular post that he shared to LinkedIn and the concept of dopamine fasting as a whole made quite some waves. But it just as quickly received a lot of criticism and backlash on grounds that it was kind of misleading. So, as far as I understand this, Dr. S then revamped his post to update the system and clarify a couple of things, and now it is Dopamine Fasting 2.0. I tried to find the original post about dopamine fasting, but that apparently is lost in time. But anyway, the Dopamine Fasting 2.0 post is still up there, and while I'm not going to read the whole thing, I will link it down below if you want to check it out. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights. So in this post, Dr. S describes Dopamine Fasting 2.0 as, quote, an evidence-based technique to manage addictive behaviors by restricting them to specific periods of time and practicing fasting from impulsively engaging in them in order to regain behavioral flexibility, end quote. He also blames media misportrayal for the misunderstanding surrounding dopamine fasting, and he goes out of his way to emphasize that dopamine fasting is not reducing dopamine and that the focus is on changing your behavior, that it's not avoiding all stimulation, only the excessive problematic ones, that it's not cutting off contact, self-isolating, or cutting out things that are good for you like exercise and stuff like that, and that the point of it is to encourage healthier behavior, that it doesn't involve meditating, spirituality, or inactivity. It's not an excuse to be completely idle, and that it's not a vacation. It's not an excuse to just do whatever the fuck you want without consequence, basically. My words, not his. He then goes on to explain the science of dopamine fasting, saying, quote, with enough training, unconditioned stimuli we've never seen before, like a red dot or notification on your smartphone, can become conditioned stimuli because we learn to anticipate a reward, the negative reinforcement of alleviating our negative emotions, or the positive reinforcement of seeing a novel thing. This double reinforcement can lead to impulsive/addictive behavior, since every time we feel bored, anxious, angry, sad, or lonely, we seek those things that both numb the bad feeling and distract our attention with pleasure, end quote. Next, he explains how it is based on cognitive behavioral therapy, and he details that regaining control of your impulses is a CBT technique called stimulus control, and he lists a few ways to accomplish it, including reducing accessibility to the stimulus, for example, putting your phone away or turning it off, doing something that makes engaging with the stimulus difficult or even impossible. He gave the example of doing sports and trying to stress eat at the same time. Obviously, those two things are incompatible. And he also mentions using tools like website blocking software to hold yourself accountable. He explains that you could also be struggling with internal stimuli, like the urges to reach for your phone even when there are no notification sounds going off. And he says that managing such responses is also based on a CBT technique called exposure and response prevention. He then goes into ways to manage it, including paying attention to your thoughts and feelings when the impulses take hold of you, urge surfing, which is just a buzzword-worthy way to say that you can experience the urges without actually giving in to them, and if you train yourself to do that, it will become easier over time. And he also mentioned returning to whatever you were doing before the impulses distracted you, but also without beating yourself up about it, judging yourself, feeling guilt or shame, or feeling like a failure or whatever. He also says, quote, "Over time, this weakens the classical conditioning in a process called habituation, which ultimately restores our behavioral flexibility." He also links to a study about internet addiction from 2013 as evidence that controlled use of the internet is a valid treatment for internet addiction. And then he linked to a study, and I quote him, said that the study showed that dopamine fasting from Facebook for a week helped students regain 13.3 hours of their time and significantly reduced depressive symptoms by 17%, which allowed them to engage in more healthy behaviors instead, end quote. Now here's the problem. I can't check the full study because it's behind a paywall and I don't feel like paying $40 just to read it, but I did check the summary and the abstract, and what he failed to mention is that in this study, three of the 2,000 people they observed made it the entire week without Facebook. So I don't know how important that is, because he's making it seem like their lives improved, their depression went away, they got so much time back, but most people failed the experiment. The abstract for that study also says, and I quote, "Those who are off Facebook for 1 week reduce news consumption, are less likely to recognize politically skewed news stories, they report being less depressed and engage in healthier activities. These results are strongest for men. Our results further suggest that after the restriction, Facebook's value increases consistent with information loss, or that using Facebook may be addictive." What they mean by that is that the people who did stay off Facebook for a while wanted to spend more time on Facebook by the end of it. So make of that what you will. Anyway, back to the post. Dr. S then suggests implementing a routine for dopamine fasting. He recommends starting off slow and gradually increasing your restrictions, and he also suggests this as a blueprint: 1 to 4 hours at the end of the day, depending on work and family demands. 1 weekend day, spend it outside on a Saturday or a Sunday. 1 weekend per quarter, go on a local trip, and 1 week per year, go on a vacation. But he also suggests managing and controlling the hours you do spend online, even if you're allowing yourself to do it. He also praised China for limiting video game time in minors to 1.5 hours a day during the week, and I think 3 hours a day on weekends. He literally said, quote, "The Chinese are likely ahead of the curve here, since they've seen how much internet addiction has devastated their youth." But I do feel like it's kinda tone deaf for him to have said that, if you understand the climate of China and what is actually going on there, and the implications that the government can control how and when you enjoy things. But that is a discussion for a different day. He then goes on to praise the 2.0 system and reminds people that it's not actually a set of rules. He also reminds us that the goal is not to deprive ourselves of dopamine completely, but rather to manage when and how we get it. He goes on to say that the goal is to reduce anything that causes distress, impairment, or addiction. And he says that it's up to us to decide what those things are, but he does give us a couple of examples by listing emotional eating, the internet/gaming, gambling/shopping, porn/masturbation, thrills/novelty seeking, and recreational drugs, and then he elaborates on each one of those things and the potentially negative impacts they can have on us, but I don't need to read all of that. Then he recommends that instead of engaging in those things, we can fill our time with healthier things, healthier ways to get dopamine, and he mentions and that you don't need to do nothing or meditate during a dopamine fast unless you would like to. Just engage in regular activities that reflect your values. He gives some examples: health promoting things like exercise or cooking, leading, like helping or serving others, relating to people, talking or bonding over activities, learning, reading, listening, and such things, and creativity, so writing, art, music. You know what creativity is. And then he ends off his post by reiterating that it's the habit that is the problem and that moderation is key. But I also found this article from Harvard Health. It's a really quick read, like you can literally skim through it in like a minute. I will link it down below as well, but I just want to go over some things that they say in their article. So firstly, they quoted Dr. S, who apparently when speaking to the New York Times said, quote, "Dopamine is just a mechanism that explains how addictions can become reinforced and makes for a catchy title. The title's not to be taken literally."
Oh, my bird friend is back. Oh, hello, Hoot Hoot. Oh, you are so cute, Hoot Hoot. I love you. Hi. Hi. Okay, bye.
There's a little bird and he only has one foot and he keeps coming to visit me by my windows and I just saw him there. Oh, he's so cute. Anyway, the article also says, as a heading, you can't fast from a naturally occurring brain chemical, and that, quote, a dopamine fast doesn't actually lower your dopamine levels. They then go on to say, quote, unfortunately, legions of people have misinterpreted the science as well as the entire concept of a dopamine fast. People are viewing dopamine as if it were heroin or cocaine and are fasting in the sense of giving themselves a tolerance break so that the pleasures of whatever they are depriving themselves of, food, sex, human contact, will be more intense or vivid when consumed again, believing that depleted dopamine stores will have replenished themselves. Sadly, it doesn't work that way at all. Then a little bit further in the article, they go on to say, human interaction, unless it is somehow compulsive and destructive, is in the category of healthy activities that are supposed to supplant the unhealthy ones, such as surfing social media for hours each day. In essence, the dopamine fasters are depriving themselves of healthy things for no reason, based on faulty science and a misinterpretation of a catchy title. And then they end off their article saying, unfortunately, the modern wellness industry has become so lucrative that people are creating snappy titles for age-old concepts. Perhaps that is how to best categorize this fad. If only we can get its proponents to look at us or speak to us without disturbing their dopamine levels in order to explain this to them. And that is pretty much what we are dealing with in this video. A concept that was somewhat based on science, but sorely misunderstood, blown out of proportion, and then implemented incorrectly. But now that we have all of that out of the way, the question remains, do dopamine fasts actually work? Or in my case specifically, would a digital detox improve the quality of my life and, most importantly, my productivity and work ethic? Or is it a waste of time? I decided to see for myself. So that Friday night that I realized that I had lost 2 whole days of my life doom scrolling on Instagram, I decided that the very next day I was going to cut out social media and also minimize my phone usage as much as was possible. The thing is that I didn't prepare, I didn't script it, I didn't plan it. It was a very spur of the moment thing where it was like, I'm gonna finish my beer and scroll on Instagram and live my best life on my phone, but tomorrow morning, I'm cutting it out completely. It was very impromptu. And here's what happened. So it's about 20 to 8 in the morning, one of those rare days that I actually wake up before 10 a.m. I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning, and immediately, as soon as I opened my eyes, I forgot that I was going to try and not use my phone today, so I've already opened WhatsApp and Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and the New York Times Games app. Whoops. By the way, this is a pile of laundry that I haven't packed away in a week. That's one of the things I need to do today. So, okay, on to the next part of this. Oh good lord, this place is such a mess. So I put my phone away and got started on all of the tasks I had been neglecting. I started with the dishes and I thought about my phone a lot. I had many urges to reach for it, but managing them was easy. I didn't actually feel like shit because I couldn't unlock it every 10 seconds. It was simply a matter of being conscious of an otherwise automated response. The urges really did become stronger every time a notification sounded though, but what I really missed the most was background noise. Usually when I do the dishes or clean, I have YouTube videos or music playing, or I have voice note conversations with my friends. So it wasn't so much the inactivity that bugged me as it was the silence. Also, I thought back to Drew Gooden and how he had done a dopamine fast as well, and I couldn't help but think of this thing that he said in it.
Not to get too existential about it or anything, but like, that's a lot of fucking time that I'm wasting doing nothing. I do fear that one day a lot of us in this generation are gonna look back on these precious years of our life and be like, oh my god, why did I waste so much time scrolling through shit that for the most part just made me feel worse? And yet, even as I say that, there's still part of me that's like, well, but that's where everyone is. I gotta go see what they're talking about.
Then I packed my laundry away. Would you look at that? Something I avoided doing for a week. Took 5 minutes to do. Wow. I also got a phone call I had to attend to, and then I took a bath, and that was interesting. She's clean, she's fresh, she smells like lemon zest. So that was interesting. I honestly thought that it was going to be so much worse than it was, but it wasn't actually that bad. Because the thing is that when I bath, I usually take my phone with me into the bathroom for background noise, so that I don't have to be alone with my thoughts. For some unknown reason, I get a lot of anxiety when I bath. I think it's mostly just down to sensory overload, like there's so much going on, as much as I enjoy my bubble baths. So I usually have like YouTube videos playing in the background, generally gaming videos. So yeah, that was interesting because I had to go without it and I was left alone with my thoughts. Y'all think this is an excessive amount of sunscreen? No, this is an appropriate amount of sunscreen, just by the way. It's supposed to coat your skin. But anyway, so I didn't like keep track of everything that I was thinking of. I'll do my best to like just remember the random things that I thought of. Avril Lavigne is one of them. I thought about a lot of music. I was thinking of an EP that I want to professionally record. I thought about my friends a lot. I'm just gonna sit on the amp. It's a better angle. Yeah, the anxiety did flare a teeny tiny little bit, but maybe like 5%, which is far, far, far below the threshold of what I can actually handle. I paid a lot of attention to the ambient noise because I live next to a very busy main road. I'm sure you've heard it many times in my videos. So yeah, I was listening to the sounds of traffic and people walking by and kids playing in the streets and stuff. I also thought back to Finland because the water was really hot, and at one point it was like, I am uncomfortable. I really hope this doesn't trigger a panic attack. I was like, bitch, you were in a fucking sauna in Finland. You can handle a relatively warm bath. I also thought a lot about how some people have internal monologues, which I don't. And then I was wondering if people do skits of like what they're thinking, and like their mouths aren't moving, but they're saying the thoughts to portray that they're thinking. Like, I always thought that that was just a joke. You know, it was just like, how else are you going to portray what somebody is thinking? But now I'm questioning if that is actually what people's thoughts sound like, because I don't have an internal monologue. Oh yes, and the other thing with this was that it was kind of nice to just be in the moment, because when I take my phone with me, I am obviously thinking, you know, please don't let my phone fall in the bath, and if I want to adjust the volume or skip past the sponsorships, because I will skip past sponsorships every fucking time. I don't care how much I love the YouTuber. The second they say this video is sponsored, I skip. I don't care. I'm never ever going to sit through sponsored ads. So when I'm in the tub and I'm watching videos and then the sponsorship message comes through, then I have to dry my hands so that I can touch my phone, so that I can skip ahead, and you know, just constantly worrying about my phone getting wet or falling in the water or stuff like that. And it was kind of nice to not have that extra level of anxiety added to bath time. So there was that. But not gonna lie, it was kind of hella boring. I need to work now. Now I just want to add here that I have not been formally diagnosed with ADHD, but the more I look into it, the more it resonates. I am now convinced that what most people think is laziness in me, what they think is demotivation, what they think is a social media addiction and the consequence of such, is actually ADHD-associated task paralysis. I don't actually have a formal diagnosis though, so I'm going to let somebody who does explain it to you. I saw this Markiplier clip on Instagram not too long ago, and it describes what I go through almost every goddamn day.
It's the part that I've talked about before with ADHD where you can want to do something. And you can be at the place where you're like, everything is set up for me to do this thing. There's nothing in the world I want more than to do this thing that is in front of me. And for me, it's like any kind of work, anything like that. But if I'm staring at the problem, the closer I got or I pushed myself to do that thing, the more there was sandpaper rubbing in my brain. I had a physical, visceral reaction that pushed me away. You're fighting with yourself because you're like, pushing yourself to do it. Your body and the subconscious mind is rejecting against it. And it's that abrasion that causes this crippling inability to do anything.
But anyway, the work was fine, just incredibly boring and incredibly difficult to push through. Many times I wanted to reach for my phone, or yap to my friends, or scroll through social media for hours, or even do other things like check the weather or open the Finch app. But I did not. I stuck to it, and I didn't touch my phone at all while I was working. And while I was working and being productive and desperately wanting to reach for my phone at least every 15 minutes, I had a thought that maybe it's not the phone or its apps that are the problem, but the convenience of them. I am old enough to remember dialing a number on a landline phone to check the time. I am part of the generation that transitioned from being offline kids to online teens, and the advent of smarter technology was the most exciting thing in the world. My fellow South Africans, do you remember Mix-It? Of course you do. That's the era that I'm talking about. And I feel like that's why millennials are sort of the middle child in this. The generations before were already fully fledged adults with established ideas of how to do things and how this world works by the time smart technology took over. And the generations after won't know a world without it. But we got both. And perhaps in some ways that's why we're all so chronically online. Because the internet shaped us just as much as playing outside did. And we can appreciate it for what it is. Convenient. It's not all we know, but we're also not reluctant to give in to it, because it's just the natural order of things. Technology progresses, and it's a tool we use to make our lives easier and more enjoyable. Millennials are the ones that are on the cusp of the information age into what people are calling the age of comfort. But anyway, that's just a ramble, just a thought that I had. What do you make of it? Back to the vlog. Work continued as expected, and then I took a break to eat and I walked to the store. Even if I wanted to go on Instagram or something right now, I wouldn't be able to because I disconnected from my Wi-Fi, obviously, and I don't have mobile data. Jesus fucking Christ, it is hot today. Yarr, fuck, what is this? When I got back, I finally wrapped up an article I couldn't bring myself to work on for longer than I care to admit. And I'm done. That was a long day of work. Now, I am going to enjoy this beer while I scroll through Instagram for fucking hours. And I did. I doom scrolled, I played YouTube videos in the background while I cooked, I watched YouTube videos while I ate, I posted and commented and shared things and liked things and haha reacted on all the apps, and I played games on my phone, specifically the New York Times puzzle app, because I really like that and I open it every day. But more importantly, I didn't feel bad about it at all. I didn't feel like I was wasting time because it had been such a productive, successful day. But I have tried something similar before. For years now, I have tried to create a video very much like this one, putting the 5 a.m. club to the test, to see if waking up at 5 o'clock every day actually changes your life. And every time I try it, the first day is incredible, and the second day is a disaster. So I wasn't sure if the productivity of this experiment was just a fluke, because I put my mind to it and because I knew I was filming. So I decided that I would need more time to test dopamine fasting and its effects on me. It's the next day. I'm still in the same shirt. What of it? It's about 10 o'clock in the morning. I just woke up, as I'm sure you can tell. And yeah, I'm not a morning person. I haven't fucked up today. I don't really have anything important to do today apart from working. So anyway, enough with the chit chat. I'm gonna drink this coffee and wake up. I mean, not really, because this is decaf, but I'm gonna drink this coffee and wake up before I get started on the very small things I should do before I work. So I got to tidying up, but I can't show you that because my whole entire ass was showing in the footage. And then I worked, same as usual. I took a break in between because I kind of felt like shit. And then I moved the work upstairs because my bar stool is ridiculously fucking uncomfortable and my muscles were screaming at me. But I was tired, I was in pain, and I could feel the anxiety starting to rise up. So instead of pushing through it, I decided to call it a day. After I had my lunch, I crawled into bed to rest my shoulders and gave in to Instagram. And then things fucked up even more. That week I got some of the worst insomnia I have ever experienced, and I lost days to it. I was exhausted, I didn't feel well at all, my nervous system was absolutely not okay, and therefore my schedule, if you can even call it that, kind of went off the rails. And also I didn't film anything, because I didn't have the mental fortitude to get out of bed. So I had to put this experiment on hold, mostly because I was trying to prevent a panic attack, and I very much use technology to do that because human connection with my friends online, on social media, video games, the internet, those things really distract me from my anxiety. So I spent the week in bed pretty much doing that. But eventually things balanced out, so with the second week I tried again. Here's a life hack for you. Want to wake up early, but want to stay off your phone? Instead of setting an alarm, just let period pain wake you up instead. I am in so much pain. I wanted to wake up early. Optimization. Ed. This already has a page. That was my crush. Just gonna have to ignore him. Also, I just realized that this article that I went... Shh! I just realized that the article that I wanted to get done today is going to be slightly less work than I originally thought it was. This is why we read the instructions before we start working. I want my money. I want my money. Give me my money. What the fuck are you? Go away. Askis, what the fuck? Okay. Why? Ow. Why? Oh my god. Stop that. Why are you... What? And that was all that I filmed for the day. And then this experiment became an absolute fucking disaster. That night, I tried to purchase electricity. For those of you who are not aware, some people in South Africa are on the prepaid electricity system, and if you don't know what that means, go and Google it, because I don't feel like explaining that. The point is that I tried to recharge my electricity Monday night, okay? It didn't work. I buy electricity usually through my banking app, but it wasn't working. It was giving an error. So I decided, okay, fine, the app isn't working. It's not that much of an emergency. I'll just try again in the morning. So Tuesday morning rolls around. The app still isn't working. So I tried to buy the electricity on the online banking. That's not working either. So I had to get in touch with my bank to figure out what the problem was. So already, immediately off the bat, I would have failed the dopamine fast thing because I had to be on my phone. But nothing came of it. The bank didn't know what was going on. It was a back and forth, up and down, running around in circles situation. I was starting to run out of units, and so I started to stress. And then I started to feel anxious, and I could feel a panic attack coming, so I just crawled back into bed to ride it out. Eventually, I found the will and courage to leave the house. So I went to the store and tried to buy electricity there. But it turns out the entire system was down and I couldn't. And that gave me more stress and more anxiety. It ruined my entire day. So on Wednesday, I went to a different store to try to buy electricity, and there they told me that the problem was that my particular electricity meter was blocked. So I ended up spending most of that day trying desperately to fix the issue. I phoned Eskom and City Power. I was on the phone with City Power holding just to speak to somebody for more than an hour. And I also had to check social media a lot, particularly Twitter, or X as it's called. Nobody calls it that, because they were posting updates and I could see like a lot of people complaining that they had the same problem looking for a solution. So I spent a lot of time on my phone and online, and specifically on social media on that day. Oh, and I also had to communicate with my property agent and their portfolio manager because I do not have direct contact with my landlord, so I had to go through them. Another thing that happened is that it kind of triggered depression because I had just spent an amazing 2 months gallivanting in Europe where things actually work. I was in one of the nicest countries in the world, which is Finland, and now I was back in Johannesburg where nothing works and people don't give a shit about it, and most people are incompetent, and the system itself is just failing and collapsing, and the quality of life is lower than we'd all like it to be, and that really started getting to me, and I was feeling very, very down about that as well. By Thursday, there was still no solution in sight, and in fact, I was rudely awakened by City Power basically telling me that they refused to help because it wasn't their fucking problem and there was nothing they could do, even though they hadn't even tried to do anything. They basically told me to just shut up and fuck off, so I was already fucking pissed off. So then I had to phone the manufacturers of the meter to see if they knew what was going on, so it was more time on my phone, more time chatting to people, still communicating up and down with the property agents, trying to get a hold of the landlord and stuff like that. And then later on that day, I realized that I was running dangerously low on units and that I was not going to make it through the weekend if I stayed at home. So I reached out to one of my friends and I asked him if I could stay with him for the weekend just so that I could get some work done and also take a shower because I had to leave my geyser off for a week and I had no hot water. So he was fine with that plan, but just as I was about to leave, I got a phone call from my mother because there was a huge problem in my family. So both the electricity issue and the family drama continued the entire weekend, okay? It was draining and it was exhausting, and I had no choice but to constantly be on my phone trying to solve both of those problems. I was on my phone that weekend more than I usually am, and I'm on my phone a lot, so that should tell you something. And then, to add insult to injury, the friend that I was staying with didn't manage his expectations and blamed me for it, and then got upset when the very big problem that I warned him about beforehand actually took up my time. So, yeah, we had a bit of a falling out as well. Anyway, I finally got back home that Sunday. The electricity had been restored at this point, but it was the longest, most stressful week I've had in a while, and I was at the end of my mental health tether. So that Sunday I chose to just relax, and I recapped the weekend to my friends and also kept my family posted on how I was doing and everything like that, and allowed myself to fall to pieces because I was drained and the only thing I could do was cry tears of fucking exhaustion. And I also doom scrolled and spent a lot of time on social media as well. As for the last week of October, it was fairly productive, but I wasn't actually cutting out my phone use or social media or the internet or anything like that. I considered it. I considered trying again, but then I realized that if the goal of this was to have a perfect week without using my phone, then that would kind of skew the experiment of trying to and reporting back on how that went. I tried for 2 weeks in a row, and I kind of failed. And I guess that is the result of the experiment. Life happened, and that was part of the experiment. I really do think that 2 weeks is more than enough to come to a conclusion about dopamine fasting and how viable it is. So let's talk about that now. So what have we learned? Technology and social media can definitely, absolutely have a negative impact on our well-being, whether that is our health, our relationships, our mood, our productivity. It doesn't matter. Obviously, it can be unhealthy. That is not disputed, and I don't deny it. But my problem with the mentality that some people have, that it's not ADHD, it's not anxiety, it's not depression, you just spend too much time online. My problem with that is its implication. All that it's doing is perpetuating the stigma that mental illnesses aren't real, or that they're super easy to manage, or that the people who struggle with them just aren't trying hard enough to not be mentally ill. And that I absolutely cannot stand. Also, the thing is that this has happened before. If it wasn't social media that was making people depressed and ruining the quality of their life, it was sugar. And if it wasn't sugar, then it was TV. And if it wasn't TV, then it was fucking Dungeons and Dragons. I am so endlessly tired of people perpetuating this idea that mental illness is caused by everything except mental illness. Some people, like me, are not very good at focusing because we're not very good at focusing. It's because our brains are bad at it, not because TikTok destroyed all of our brain cells. Of course, spending less time online on social media can improve your mood, but it can also worsen it. Using my case, for example, it is a crutch that I use when the anxiety flares and when panic attacks start rearing their ugly head. And I'm sorry, I'm not gonna go through that. If scrolling through Instagram is going to make me feel better when my mental health is collapsing, y'all don't get to say shit about it. You have a fucking panic attack and see how easy that shit is to push through without distraction. Do it! I dare you! Report back to me when you do. I live alone. My phone is where my support system is. And even if it's not, like an active crisis or whatever, the background noise from YouTube, from a podcast, from voice notes that people send me really does make me feel less alone. And that's a good thing. The same thing applies to using my phone to keep my hands busy, the same concept as fidget toys, or using video games to blow off steam. The other thing that I thought of is that I realized that dopamine fasting is not actually meant to restrict all technology or all interaction. We went over that, right? But I just want to emphasize that I work online. Like, I kind of have to stare at a screen all day. My job is on the internet, and I also need to be on social apps to communicate with management. I need to use the internet to research the work that I'm doing. In fact, I found my job on Facebook. Like, literally, when I was in Finland, as I've mentioned multiple times now, I went into the most isolated fucking forest you could ever imagine in your life. And I still had to be connected to the internet to do my goddamn job. Also, speaking of Finland, there's something else that I want to address, and that is privilege. Wellness and self-help gurus have a tendency to look at their own lives and then promote whatever they're doing as the fix-all to all of your problems, not realizing that most of the time they are in the circumstances they are in because they are privileged. For example, scheduling when and how you enjoy entertainment might be the simplest thing in the world for somebody who is neurotypical, but it becomes a million times more difficult for people who have ADHD, for people who have anxiety, for people who have depression, for people who have addiction issues, for people who are neurodivergent. Kind of sort of the same way that people who push the idea of manifestation, where you just, you think really hard and then you get what you want, never seem to manifest all of the world wars ending. Like, I can't help but wonder, the people who are getting blown up as we speak, are they just not manifesting a peaceful life hard enough? You know, it's always the people who have all of the fucking privilege in the world who claim that manifestation is the greatest key to the universe. But then, why doesn't it work for the starving people? The same way that the people who say that you should wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning every day to get your time back and live your best life did not have to commute to work and never see the fucking sun. The same way that people will say, oh, you need to go for a mental health walk in Johannesburg where you'll get robbed. Or the same way that vegan people will claim that veganism is the one and only way to live and to eat, but they can afford healthy vegan diets. Right? So you see what I'm trying to say? These wellness gurus will push this idea that if you do things like them, your life will improve. But they never stop to think that not everybody has that luxury. Whether it's circumstance or not, you just can't paint everyone with the same brush. The same way that digital detoxes might seem like the healthiest, most life-changing thing when you live in fancy California, and not a country like South Africa that has had load shedding for years, in which we don't have internet access or can't charge our devices or use technology for as many as 8 hours a day. Or, you know, somebody in deep Africa who doesn't even have access to clean running water, never mind the internet. Is cutting out social media also going to improve the quality of their life and mental health? I don't think so. And I realize that this is not something that we can apply to everyone. Obviously, in the case of somebody who's living in abject poverty, social media is not the problem. It's not the biggest problem. But what I'm trying to say is that the amount of emphasis that is placed on scrolling, internet usage, social media, devices, video games, all of the technology that we have now, kind of feels hella blown out of proportion by a lot of people. I feel like what people don't seem to realize is that somebody who has ADHD or depression or anxiety or BPD or whichever mental disorder you can think of, somebody who's always low energy, who is never in a particularly good mood, their problems are not coming from the amount of time that they spend online. It's that depression, anxiety, ADHD, autism, neurodivergence in general makes people susceptible to social media addiction. Social media addiction is not the cause of mental illness. Mental illness makes you more vulnerable to social media addiction. But again, that was just a ramble. Those were just some of the thoughts that came to mind in this experiment. At the end of the day, I had no choice. In the second week, I literally had no choice. The only way to solve and manage my problems was to be online constantly. Because the web is the norm for communication now, and it has been for a very long time. And I really don't understand why a lot of the boomers and Gen Xers are still under the impression that it's unnatural and bad. It's literally become how this world works. Social media is not this thing on the outside. It is communication now. Of course, constantly scrolling through Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or TikTok or whatever is unhealthy. Of course it is. But is it more unhealthy than having to commute for about 2 hours to get to a 9 to 5 you absolutely fucking hate because your boss and your manager are mean to you, they're abusive to you, you work in a completely toxic environment, you never see the sun, you only get about half an hour for lunch, you have absolutely no time for yourself, and by the time you get home every day you're so tired the only thing you can do to decompress is watch TV for 4 hours? Is it more unhealthy than that? And speaking of TV, I grew up in a TV family. We would eat dinner and watch Sevendelaan every single day. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the only time the TV went off in my household was number 1, if there was load shedding, or number 2, if nobody was at home. Other than that, the TV was pretty much always on.
You're so cute, I love you so much, hoot hoot.
TV was how we got the news and the weather, and a lot of the time how we checked the actual time, and it was also our main source of entertainment, apart from books. A lot of the time it was how we bonded as a family, like back in the day of the DVD rental stores, we'd make weekends out of it a lot of the time, spend time with each other that we generally wouldn't spend with each other, and that was great too. And it was also background noise. How is it any different to how I live my life today? I like watching YouTube videos when I eat, the same way that my family enjoyed watching TV while we ate. And yes, maybe you can comment on that and say that that's why my brain is so wired to cling to social media and being online or having a constant source of entertainment and distraction. Maybe it is my upbringing. If somebody has a smart TV, nobody's gonna say shit. They're just gonna be like, ooh, smart TV, let's watch the sports, let's have a family movie night. But the second somebody likes a photo on Instagram, oh my god, you're rotting your brain! Really? Are you kidding me? Entertainment is entertainment. Social media is also so much more than entertainment. It's communication as well. And that communication is a safety net for a lot of people. Like a lot of people. This also leads me to the topic that social media has not caused more mental illness in the world. Social media has made us aware of how much mental illness there is in the world. Social media has not caused more advertising in the world. It's just made us aware of how much advertising there is in the world. We like to complain about the unskippable ads on YouTube or the ads on Facebook every 4 or so posts, right? But that's because now we can control the advertising that is fed to us. We can use ad blockers. We can pay for YouTube Premium, right? But back in the day, before social media, before that control, you couldn't ignore advertising that was in magazines, newspapers, on television, on the radio, on billboards, on actual legitimate bulletin boards that were sent as spam mail right into your fucking mailbox. Oh, and what about the advertising in sports stadiums that like literally center the entire thing? That was always there. Advertising was always there, and it was always excessive. It's just that on social media, when you can unsubscribe from things or use ad blockers or subscribe to things like YouTube Premium, where you feel like you shouldn't be subjected to it and then you are, obviously it's going to feel like you're being crushed by the weight of it. But that problem has always existed to the exact same degree that it exists today. Likewise, the world has always been subjected to unobtainable beauty, financial, and living standards. And that has always had the potential to affect the person consuming it. The world has always pushed misinformation and had a problem with propaganda and brainwashing. That is not a problem that exists because of social media or artificial intelligence. It was always there. It just changed its medium. The same way that mental illness has always existed and people have always had crippling disorders. It's just that now we're allowed to talk about it and there are audiences when we do. But having said that, there is a time and place for everything. Literally anything can become an addiction. The second you start to rely on something to feel good, and the second that you cannot say no to it, or if you do, you'll feel like shit, you're addicted to it. For example, a beer or 2 every night, no problem. Getting shit-faced on a 12-pack every night, big problem. And I think that the biggest factor here is that our phones, our devices are just so accessible to us. You could be addicted to going to the gym, but you still have to actively go to the gym. If you're addicted to your phone, chances are it's already in your hand. That makes it so much easier to give in to the urges to check Instagram, to check Facebook, to scroll mindlessly, to play games on your phone. And that's why the value lies in moderation and self-control. And yes, I do have a tendency to spend a little bit too much time on social media because I am conditioned to. I am absolutely not denying that. But reducing it is not going to take away my anxiety or potential ADHD, which again is a real concern. I'm not just saying that because I want to identify as someone with ADHD. I'm saying that because I have been looking into it for a while, and I really do think that I have it. Also, I don't really believe that reducing the time I spend online is going to take away my task paralysis, because it's not spending time online that's causing it. I can just as easily distract myself from work I don't want to do with music, or literature, or exercise, or going outside, or anything. As much as when I cut out my screen time, I really did become immensely productive, I don't think it was the digital detoxing that caused that. I think that actually what made me so productive and focused was working on this video. I was determined and I had all of the motivation in the world. I can't say whether or not I would have had such undeniable results if I wasn't working on this video trying to get those results. So, I think the reason why I had such a successful day was because of discipline, not because I cut out Instagram. Dopamine fasts are not a magical fix-all to all of life's problems. And yes, there's a chance that they might make you more productive or put you in a better mood, but there's also a chance that they'll make you less productive and put you in a worse mood because, as we explored earlier in this video, that's not how dopamine works. And often, when we deprive ourselves of things, we overcompensate when we have access to them again. Ignoring social media, making time for the important things, and controlling how much entertainment we consume is a matter of discipline, not dopamine. And also ability, because let's remember, not everybody is neurotypical, and some things are infinitely more difficult for neurodivergent people to do. I would have to test this more off camera without the agenda of making a YouTube video about it to really and truly see if cutting out social media improves the quality of my life, but I really don't think it will. And for now, I'm going to say that on the days that I did test it, I don't think it did. It was making this video. Because ironically, content creation and the satisfaction I get when I produce a video, and also the attention and the likes and the comments that I get once those videos are uploaded, ironically, they give me dopamine hits. And that's what I was working towards. Still, we could all benefit from unplugging every once in a while. This world is big and beautiful, and people are so much nicer in person than they are online. We shouldn't have to experience that through a screen 100% of the time. And sometimes walking away from the screens and just living your life in the moment is the healthiest thing you can do. I'm not saying that a dopamine fast or a digital detox won't work for you. I'm just saying that I don't think they work in general. And I think that the science behind how dangerous and toxic social media and the internet and digital devices are is kind of a crock of shit. But I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I wouldn't know. This is just my experience and what I have come to make of it. So, if you feel like you are struggling with your mental health because you spend too much time on social media, go ahead and reduce the hours that you spend on social media. But if you're mentally ill, I can guarantee you're still gonna be mentally ill afterwards. It's not going to rewire your brain. It physically cannot do that. It is impossible for digital detoxes to do that. Anyway, I am going to shut up now. Thanks for watching, and keep looking up. I'll probably see you on Instagram. Bye.